Hey there, good afternoon to you. It is 3:06 now, News Talk 105.9 WMAL, where we are always making sense of the news. That includes today. Ginny Gentles will be with us at 3:30 from the Education Freedom Center, the Independent Women's Forum. We talked to her about Joe Biden's latest insult directed at Christians this weekend, one of the holiest weekends of the entire year for Christians everywhere. Gabriel Noronha is here at 4:30. From Polaris National Security, former State Department advisor. We'll talk to him about everything going on in the Middle East, including Joe Biden's decision to try and run away from supporting Israel. What's that all about? Gabriel joins us on that subject. And then at 5 o'clock, Mike Gonzalez is here. He'll give us the big picture on Marxism and what this is all really about, everything you're seeing play out from the White House to the media and beyond. You can join us at 888-630-9625, 888-630-WMAL. If you celebrate Easter, I hope you had a very happy one. It was a beautiful one for me and my family and friends. We got to spend Easter Sunday in Georgia with some family friends. We went to church with them, and goodness, it was just so awesome. It was such a wonderful time, and our Mass was excellent. It was packed to the gills. It was packed to the gills. Now, it's not unusual for an Easter or Christmas Mass or church service to have more people in attendance than maybe the average weekly service. But I don't know. It felt like people were practically hanging out of the rafters. There were so many people in attendance. And I kind of wonder from your perspective if that was the case as well. 888-630-9625, 888-630-WMAL. Have you noticed at all that people are more engaged with their faith, or at least now curious about what it means to be engaged with religion, with church? Have you detected this phenomena in your life? I feel like if there's a silver lining to all of the chaos, it's that in our efforts to grasp for meaning and understanding about all of it, people keep finding themselves back in a pew or on a kneeler or with their hands folded much more frequently. So, every so often all the time I get people who come up to me and they're like, oh my gosh, and they feel so pessimistic about everything that's going on around them, especially to their country. And I do too. Although, I err on the side of optimism, but I do get worried about where everything is headed. I will say the one silver lining, though, is to the extent that the world is out of control, the Creator is not. He's definitely not. And people really turn to him, don't they? As things get wild and crazy. It's nobody prays more fervently than the desperate man. And there's all sorts of reason for us to have a sense of desperation, but definitely to turn to faith. So that's, if there's an upside, there it is, for sure. And I notice it among families and friends and colleagues. I had a colleague this very weekend who had kind of strayed away from the faith, and he decided that he went all in on being Catholic. He decided, this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to fully come into communion with the Catholic Church, and that's what he did this weekend. God bless him for it. It's great. And in fact, the Easter Vigil Mass in the Catholic Church is by design one of, if not the most holy individual service that's held each year for Catholics. And the reason for that is there are many, but there's a lot of readings. It's unlike a normal Mass. So a lot of Catholics kind of cringe at the Easter Vigil Mass because it's like, oh my gosh, it could go on for hours. And it's true, Catholics are used to kind of the 1 hour Mass. And when it gets past an hour, you're like, hey, why is this guy not landing the plane? Can't we get out of here? But the Easter Vigil can be as many as 3 hours more. And there's a lot of readings. It takes you through the Bible in various stages, all of creation history. And but the other really big feature of the Eastern Vigil Mass is you're bringing in all of these people who would like to join the church, who've been learning all of the details of the church, how it operates, and preparing themselves for the sacraments, and then they receive them. They receive them there in front of all of the faithful who are in attendance. It's a beautiful evening. And so the Easter Vigil Mass is super important and a very holy event. And, I don't know, this may have been lost in some of the coverage this weekend, but what was the left doing this weekend? Well, you, of course, know that they were doing everything they could to insult Christians and to instead place a priority on a fake holiday that involved dehumanizing people and suggesting that they were born in mistaken bodies. insane, this so-called Transgender Day of Visibility. We'll get into that in more detail coming up. But the other piece that should not be left out of the conversation was the effort to disrupt the Easter Vigil Mass that took place at St. Patrick's Cathedral in New York City. You had left-wing lunatics who disrupted the Mass this weekend, the Easter Vigil Mass, screaming about how they were anti-Israel and how the rest of us should be too, in the middle of the church service. Take a listen to this. It's just chaos. It's just chaos. And luckily, I don't know who it was. Maybe this was some of the ushers, just men of the church, basically. Got up there. They grabbed these people by the shoulders, these jackals, and they ran them out. They dragged them out of there. And there was more than a few people who noticed this, and they said, wait a second. If this had happened, say, in a synagogue or a mosque, and you had people disrupting holy services there in such a flagrant and disrespectful way, they'd be in jail. There'd be like all sorts of hate crime investigations going on. But no, not with a Catholic church. A Catholic church, they're just expected to turn the other cheek here. And that's fine. You can do that. So that was a distasteful feature of the American left's behavior this weekend. The other, of course, is this decision to prioritize the so-called Transgender Day of Visibility. And I shudder even saying those words because, of course, this is a fake holiday. This is completely invented. It has no place in tradition or any sort of real traditional faith or anything. It's literally just a modern invention. It's only been cited or used for the past couple of years. And the idea is that what you have is are people who are damaged and being misled by the broader culture, unfortunately, who should embrace a sort of demented narcissism. That, oh, this is a debate about looking at me. Look at me. I'm me. Everyone has to look at me. And if you don't look at me, you're doing something wrong. It's about me. It is a fully narcissistic episode that is taking hold of our culture in all sorts of places, and all of our institutions are ridiculously celebrating it. Ridiculously. Of course, they have very little time to even acknowledge the existence of Easter. The White House effort on Easter was pathetic. And of course, they have the White House Easter egg roll today. But that's about as secular of an event as you can possibly imagine. They've done everything to strip the religious component out of it. There's an art contest associated with the Easter egg roll, and the White House is sending out advisories saying you can't include any religious themes in your artwork. I'm sorry, what? How do you even call it an Easter egg roll or Easter egg? How can you use that phrasing and you're not allowed to reference Easter? You're not allowed. It's an Easter egg. Okay, what does that mean? I can't tell you. It's against the rules. I'm not allowed to tell you what it means to be an Easter egg. And so this Transgender Day of Visibility thing, all of these lefties have been going just absolutely wild this weekend with it. And they pretend that it's because they're decent. They pretend that we're being inclusive. We're coming to people as they are. We're accepting them for who they are. First of all, you're not accepting them for who they are. By saying someone is transgender, it's literally the opposite of accepting them for who they are. It's saying that they are a mistake. It is a body negativity claim. Remember body positivity, where you're supposed to just accept, like, no matter what shape you're in, no matter how fat you are, you're totally fine. Everything is fine. Nobody should try to help you. Nothing. Body positivity. You should be totally happy in whatever circumstance or condition you are. So the left used to tell us this. And of course, that was at the expense of people's health at the time, too. And now they're body negativity people. Now their perspective is, no, your body's a mistake. And the only way out of it is the pharmaceutical industry and TikTok and mass social delusions. That's the only way out of this. You're saying, what? How could these positions are incoherent? They're definitionally incoherent. Heck, the whole Transgender Day of Visibility thing is incoherent. You know that for years, to the extent that people talked about this issue, people would say, actually, I'm not a man, I'm a woman. There was a common phrase that was used to describe this. It was, you would say somebody was passing. And in fact, the transgender people, for who they are, still use phrases like this. Oh, they pass as a woman. In other words, they are able to go through society undetected as actually a man. And they, quote, pass as a woman. And this was the goal, that you could live your life as a woman and no one would be the wiser, and on and on. And you'd be accepted as a woman, and then that'd be fine. But now instead, it's not that at all, is it? It's incoherent. And this will get to the Marxist ideology of all of this when we have Mike Gonzalez coming up in the 5 o'clock hour. But they're saying, no, actually, I want you to dwell on and emphasize the fact that I was born on the wrong body. So now it's not necessarily about passing. It's more about rubbing it in your face. What? What is this? What is this? And so here's just a couple of examples of this. Lefties, to include the White House, all celebrating this Transgender Day of Visibility. They put a lot of production effort into this. They recorded videos and statements, and they got out Photoshop, and they made all sorts of things to share on social media. They wanted everybody to know it was not Easter. That was not, again, the White House wrote a single sentence on that subject on Twitter. Literally a sentence. It was nothing. No, Transgender Day of Visibility, they had a fully produced package of information and graphics and all sorts of things so you could know you were celebrating the wrong holiday this weekend. Here's Gavin Newsom, for example, and his fembot wife, the two of them just sitting down talking about how important it is that we recognize the Trans Day of Visibility.
Today on Trans Day of Visibility, we celebrate the trans individuals in our communities and recognize their struggles for recognition and increasingly survival in the face of unfathomable hate which leads them to often feel...
By the way, the hate for that kind of person comes from the left, because all they're doing is enabling that kind of person's destruction.
...safe or like they don't belong.
And we also celebrate the many contributions that they've made. We've had trans leaders...
List that, please. What contributions are you talking about? We celebrate. They just say words and like bumper stickers, but with no meaning. Go ahead. What are the contributions?
Forefront of progress in every field imaginable, from STEM to the arts to human rights advocacy.
What do you even
so
mean by
more.
this?
All across the country, we're seeing a rise in legal, political, and physical attacks on those in the trans community.
And it's just appalling.
It's the left that's putting them under the knife and sterilizing them. So in that sense, he's right.
And unconscionable, this discrimination, and it's gone on for far too long.
Look, at the end of the day, everyone wants and deserves to be respected, connected, and protected. Our trans community deserves no less. So Jen and I wanted to add our voices and our support to the millions of people celebrating today.
For those of you in the trans community.
Do you think millions of people were celebrating yesterday? Well, they were celebrating Easter, of course. Millions, many more than millions. You have billions of people celebrating Easter yesterday. Millions of people celebrating the so-called Trans Day of Visibility. And Gavin Newsom not alone. A lot of them out there doing this. Gretchen Whitmer, the tyrant Gretchen Whitmer out in Michigan, had this to say.
On Trans Day of Visibility, my message is simple. I see you and I've got your back. There's nothing more American than living your life the way you want to live it.
There's nothing more American than men pretending to be women.
That's what today's all about. It's about embracing who you are and being proud of it. Right now, there are efforts underway in other states to criminalize the trans community just for living their lives.
Yeah, I mean, come on. Who wouldn't want a dude inside of his daughter's locker room? What is wrong with you, bigot?
These hateful laws and bills lead to real harm, ranging from bullying and harassment to outright violence.
Again, the left is the one torturing these people.
As governor, I'm focused on making Michigan a more welcoming state where anyone and everyone can build a great life no matter who they are. And that's why we have taken action to expand civil rights protections for the LGBTQ plus community.
Fine, you lead the way. How about you give your job to a man today? Literally step aside, let a man take over, and don't complain about it, because that's the inclusive thing to do. And it better be a man who's pretending to be a woman. Okay, let's go to the phones. That's where we find Sarah in Montgomery County, line 2. Sarah, good afternoon. You're on the Vince Coglianese Show.
Good afternoon. Happy Easter, everyone. It's Easter Monday, and Easter is over next Sunday, so it's still Easter. Anyway, we had midnight mass, so many new Catholics. So many, it went on forever. I didn't get home till midnight. Then the next morning, The morning mass, 10:30, went on for another half an hour or 45 minutes before the next mass could start. So many people. It was great. The priest thanked everybody for being good in the parking lot. It was that bad. Catholics in the parking lot. We could die out there. I won't go on about that. But anyway, okay, so the pendulum, it swings. We see this craziness and this evil out there.
Yeah.
No, that's not most of us. That's all I have to say.
What do you mean by that? It's not most of us? So you're saying that most of us are not participating in the evil?
Not crazy and evil like Pelosi and Biden. Mm-hmm. Fake Catholics trying to turn people into believing that Catholics are all evil and crazy and liars. They're not Catholics.
Of course not. And you know what's interesting, Sarah, is that what they try to do is they try to exploit your decency, as always. So what they'll
My what?
Your decency.
They try to exploit.
Do you understand what I'm saying? Decency?
I think the word cuts out on my phone, and I do apologize. You don't want to take all this time from me, but I'm glad to listen to you.
Well, Sarah, thank you very much for the call. No, so what I was trying to say to Sarah, and it's unfortunately getting lost in the connection here, is that they're exploiting the decency, especially of Christians, broadly. Because the way that they lay this out, right, they're like, well, it's a transgender day of visibility today. Well, it's also Easter. Yeah, we didn't say it wasn't. Okay. In fact, and then they tell you, they're like, oh, in fact, there's always been a transgender day of visibility, March 31st all the time. It just happens to land this year on Easter Sunday. Stop complaining about it. Jesus would be, this is where the blasphemy comes in. They start saying Jesus would endorse the transgender day of visibility. Really? Jesus' perspective would be that it's good to convince people that they were born as mistakes. Lecture me more on my faith, please. And then they say, if you react to it, if you're like, wait a second, that's blasphemous. That's insane. No, we shouldn't go along with this. What are you, a bigot? What are you, intolerant? This is the trap they try and lay for you to, again, exploit your decency. And I don't know about you, but I'm not falling for that. That's not happening at all. Coming up, more details on this subject. We're going to be joined by Ginny Gentles from the Education Freedom Center, the Independent Women's Forum. She's got some thoughts on Joe Biden's behavior this weekend. He claims to be a devout Catholic. Okay. Good afternoon to you. 3:36 here, News Talk 105.9 WMAL, where we're making sense of the news. Coming up 4:30, Gabriel Naronha joins us. We talk to him about the latest news out of the Middle East. A top Iranian general just killed today in what appears to be an Israeli strike. We'll get the latest on that story and so much more. And then Mike Gonzalez is joining us at 5 o'clock from the Heritage Foundation. He's got a new book coming out, and we're going to talk to him about all of this incoherent Marxism we see all around us and the left's strategy for, what's the old phrase? Fundamentally transforming America. Mike talks about that with us at 5. You can join us, 888-630-9625, 888-630-WMAL. Here is Coringe earlier today.
So the criticism over the Transgender Day of Visibility, the White House said that the president wouldn't abuse his faith for political purposes. Does the president think that's what Republicans are doing on this?
I mean, look, just a couple of things, and really so surprised by the misinformation that's been out there around this, and I want to be very clear. Every year for the past several years, on March 31st, Transgender Day of Visibility is marked. And as we know, for folks who understand the calendar and how it works, Easter falls on different Sundays, right? Every year. And this year it happened to coincide with Transgender Visibility Day. And so that is the simple fact. That is what has happened. That is where we are. And I do want to say a couple of things because I think it's important here. As you just stated in your questions, what we've been hearing out there, a lot of misinformation done on purpose. And as a Christian who celebrates Easter with family, President Biden stands for bringing people together and upholding the dignity and freedoms of every American. Now, sadly, and it's not surprising, right? It is actually unsurprising that politicians are seeking to divide and weaken our country with cruel, hateful, and dishonest rhetoric. It is dishonest what we have heard the past 24 hours. It is untrue what we heard over the weekend.
Seeking to divide, hateful, dividing our country. Who's doing that exactly? Joining us now is Ginny Gentles. She is the director of the Education Freedom Center at the Independent Women's Forum and the host of the Students Over Systems podcast. Ginny, good to have you with us. Thank you.
Oh, thanks for having me.
What do you make of Joe Biden's decision to proclaim March 31st, most importantly, as the Transgender Day of Visibility, and then give short shrift to Easter?
Well, it's not surprising that this happened. As his spokesperson said, he's done this each year. And back in 2022, while he issued the Transgender Day of Visibility proclamation, he coupled that with a fact sheet that was packed with policies that this administration is pushing that seek to eradicate the male-female binary, that seek to put males in women's prisons, males in women's sports, and that seek to pressure doctors and medical providers to cut off the breasts of emotionally vulnerable and mentally unwell young people. So these proclamations have been happening annually. We shouldn't be surprised, and we should pay a lot of attention to the policies that are behind the proclamations.
Yeah, but the left says that Jesus would support all of the things that you just laid out, Jenny. And so how could we be against those?
Well, they certainly have these really dark creeds that they put into all of these liturgical celebrations, these calendars that they have that are packed with Transgender Day of Visibility, with Transgender Remembrance Day, with International Pronoun Day, with Transgender Week, with Pride Month, with History Month. They've packed the calendar. And they make sure that the focus, the worship, the veneration, the idolization is on this new gender ideology, on this worship of the sacred trans people. It's very intentionally trying to fill in a vacuum in the United States where too many people have fallen away from organized religion, yet they're still yearning to worship, they're yearning to belong, they're yearning to be part of something bigger than themselves. And the trans activists have moved in and created this liturgical calendar and created these rituals and encouraged them to worship gender ideology instead.
So you're obviously getting to why this is such an intentional thing that the White House and the left more broadly is doing. Although you just heard from Karine Jean-Pierre, she claimed, "Oh no, it's merely coincidence. It's just a coincidence that this year of all years that these two dates fell on at the same time, and this is much ado about nothing. This is the right just looking to create some sort of culture war moment where there is none." But Ginny, you argue that actually no, the point of emphasis here is designed to be a rejection of Easter, to be that flagrant and in your face.
Right. Well, this holiday, if that's what we're going to call it, was created by a man who now goes by the name of Rachel. He's a male psychotherapist and founder of Transgender Michigan. He created it back in 2009, because he wanted to spread trans joy. And I encourage everyone to look him up. He goes by Rachel Crandall Croker, and he runs Transgender Michigan. So this fella created this holiday, called it a holiday, and the activists ran with it. The very highly funded organizations like GLAAD and GLSEN and the Human Rights Campaign, which are now controlled by trans activists, are making sure that our culture is really focused on all these holidays, including this one. It's interesting what Biden's spokesperson admitted to when she was saying, you shouldn't be surprised. Of course, we had to celebrate this on March 31st. We always have to. Yeah, you do, because the activists make you. So, step aside, Christians, and Easter. You don't have control over the White House. The activists do, and they're admitting that, and they're not apologizing. In fact, they're attacking all of the Christians and other sensible, common sense people in society who questioned this decision to prioritize the Transgender Day of Visibility over Easter. They dismissed our concerns as cruel, hateful, and dishonest rhetoric. Is it? Or are we just saying, hey, what are you doing here? This doesn't make sense.
Well, I happen to think the hateful thing is to enable the destruction of your fellow human. The hateful thing is to mutilate children, to sterilize them, to lead them into a life of chaos and sadness. I think that's the hateful thing, honestly. The hateful thing is rejecting Christians and treating them like garbage and acting like their concerns are ill-founded. And also, like, this doesn't work. I mean, the whole idea that Joe Biden is a devout Catholic is so laughable on its face, but among the many reasons why is this concept that God has made a bunch of mistakes and that people were born in the wrong body, that he didn't actually create them man and woman, that people exist on some sort of spectrum, and how dare you suggest that they need to fit into categories. And all of this is pretty explicitly a rejection of religion and Judeo-Christian values, is it not?
Oh, I absolutely agree. I wrote in a New York Post op-ed just that yesterday, that the Biden administration's decision to glorify a movement that teaches children they were born in the wrong body on Easter Sunday, it's a big mistake. It's so cruel to teach children you were born wrong.
Yes.
And if you feel uncomfortable in your body, you should cut off a body part. You should go on puberty blockers and cross-sex hormones and become sterilized and become a medical patient for the rest of your life and have all kinds of dangerous medical outcomes and side effects. That cruelty to this movement and a veneration of the activists who push this ideology is insane. It's really insane. And I think that's maybe why we're seeing such a big backlash, because it's not just the Easter thing. It's just that the people they're done. They're done with the insanity. They don't want to teach children they were born in the wrong body. They don't want to teach them that doctors guess wrong, that they can be a boy, girl, both are not, neither. They don't want a full attack on biological reality, and they don't want men in women's spaces.
Yes.
Knock it off.
Well, that's where I wanted to go next, which is that I think that's been the big turning point for a lot of people who were kind of asleep to this issue, because for the most part, like, people are decent. They really don't want to mess in the details of anybody else's life. Live and let live is kind of the attitude that most people take, and I respect that. But what it's led to, in no small part, is now we have men stealing all sorts of things from women, which is honors, placement in sports, stealing their spaces, going into locker rooms and bathrooms, and it's got, like, literally going into women's prisons, raping women in women's prisons, pretending to be women. The whole thing is so beyond the pale that I think the average person is waking up to this and going, wait a second, that's not what I signed up for.
Right. They're definitely waking up to those extreme situations which are becoming pervasive. You might think, oh, there's just a handful of men who are competing in women's sports. Just let them be. That's becoming very clear that that's not the case. And then the consequences where these women, often young women, are getting really hurt. Like, they're really suffering physically because of the injuries inflicted on them by the men in their spaces, in their sports. And at Independent Women's Forum, we have a new series called Cruel and Unusual Punishment that exposes what happens when you let often violent and sexual predator men into women's prisons. These women are trapped in there with these predators. It's unbelievably cruel. And then going a step back, even before we get to those more obvious and physically clear examples, it wasn't just the president who put out a proclamation. It was multiple cabinet leaders as well. The Secretary of Education had a video message. We need you, transgender students. Why? Why does he need to fabricate this group of students who think that they were born in the wrong body? And the Secretary of HHS put out a statement honoring the great transgender, non-binary, and two-spirit leaders, promising to double down on our commitment to push the tides of progress forward. And then, of course, good old Rachel Levine, who's the male Assistant Secretary of Health but likes to dress as a woman, he promised to provide children who identify as transgender with access to 1,000 program counselors who are specifically trained to work with them. So they're admitting, agency by agency, leader by leader, that they are very intentionally creating this phenomenon of young people who think that they are not their biological sex anymore. And that movement, that creation, particularly when it's creating boys who think that they're women or think that they can call themselves women whenever they want, endangers women. And at IWF, we're done with that.
And the people who are perpetuating all of this evil are First of all, they're everywhere. It seems like almost every one of our institutions is very captured by this. And there's a suffocating quality to it, which is like, I don't know where to go. Like, there are fewer and fewer spaces where it's even acceptable for you and I to have the conversation we're having now. And I'm sitting here going, wait a second, you're on the side of light and decency here. You're on the side of humanizing people, empathizing with them, looking to figure out how to rescue them from all of this. And the left is, of course, damaging them under the guise of helping. And, I saw just now before the show started, the Cartoon Network, which is, again, a children's cartoon network, literally, they are doing this whole thing. Yesterday, they were celebrating the Transgender Day of Visibility. It took over all of their social media accounts and they said, we're not doing hate today. Be kind or be blocked. Now, of course, they didn't post anything about Easter, not a single thing. But they did post a whole bunch about how kids could be born in the wrong bodies. What is it going to take for us to be able to fight back against this, given that the forces are so overwhelming and so powerful who are a part of the destruction of the country?
Well, we need to be really clear with everybody that tweeting when one of these things happens, it's important. It sends a signal that it's okay to speak up. I'm going to speak up. You can too. And so That's an important first step. That's not the last step, though. That proclamation really didn't do anything as far as changing society. It just revealed the president's priorities. Those policies that the administration are putting into place and enforcing with the hammer and the power that they have of the federal government, those are what we should be laser focused on and pushing back on. And everyone who is concerned about the proclamation needs to write to their member of Congress and say, I'm also concerned about the policy. So I think I'd say that's the first thing. We can't just participate in that momentary outrage and then move on. We can't move on because it's so clear what's happened with all of these institutions that are captured, all of these policies that are in place. And then to your point on the culture, I noticed that this was happening during COVID. I'll admit to watching a fair bit of kids TV with my children, and almost every show seemed to have a trans-identified or at least LGBTQ-identified character. And I thought, what's going on? Like, even if you look at Gallup polling, it's just now hit 7% of the total adult population in the U.S. that identifies as something.
Yes.
And, it's less than 1% that identifies as transgender. Why do all of these shows have this? So parents need to watch this garbage with their kids and recognize what their kids are watching when they're over in their iPad with their headphones on, and they need to switch it off. Like, take away the Netflix, take away the iPad for a little bit, and support alternatives to children's entertainment.
Yeah, and one of the things I've heard about the reason why it's so pervasive is the money. Is that oftentimes the production of programming like this or video games or any other medium where you consume stories, a lot of these networks and production houses, they're reliant on access to capital, just like any business. And that capital comes with strings attached. Like, you will include these themes if you want access to our money. And as a result, it's everywhere, Jenny.
Well, we definitely can sound like conspiracy theorists when we say, well, follow the money. But for goodness sake, follow the money. Like, why did the Human Rights Campaign flip a switch and become a trans activist organization right after the Supreme Court ruled that gay marriage was legal? Well, all the gay marriage supporters weren't going to fund them anymore, but the trans activists were. And there's some really, really wealthy billionaires who are men who are really bought into this, not just this like gender ideology, but transhumanism. Like, it's really disturbing, the path that they want to take society and the world on. So recognize that there's some very influential men, largely, out there funding organizations, activist organizations like Human Rights Campaign, and they're the ones that get these calendars in place with all these holidays. And then, and then there's plenty of individuals that are providing the funding for the shows, as you mentioned. Yeah. And then the corporations are captured as well, so they're not going to pull out as advertisers. In fact, they're going to buy into it and get into the spirit of all these holidays as well. And unless we push back, unless there's a Bud Light kind of situation happening on a regular basis.
Right, and what you just described with the Human Rights Campaign, their pivot from gay marriage to transgender issues just for the money, is the same thing Planned Parenthood has been doing, by the way. As fewer and fewer women actually even get pregnant, Planned Parenthood has become the single biggest distributor of cross-sex hormones in the country now in order to push along this idea that people are born in the wrong bodies. So, again, follow the money. Ginny Gentles, thank you very much for all of your hard work and your time today. Really appreciate you. Thank you so much. Coming up, the Israelis seem to have just killed an Iranian general, and Joe Biden is running away from Israel. Gabriel Naronha joins us in the next hour.